The neighborhood was quiet, a tranquil enclave nestled amidst emerald trees and manicured lawns. Each house stood as a testament to suburban dreams and picket fence ideals. I had moved here seeking peace, a retreat from the ceaseless rhythm of city life. But beneath the veneer of this idyllic setting, a storm brewed quietly. Its name was Karen. Karen was a fixture in the neighborhood, the self-appointed overseer of all things proper and orderly. Her eyes, sharp like a hawk's, missed nothing. Her presence was felt in the clipped hedges, the neatly arranged trash bins, the whispered gossip exchanged over fences like illicit contraband. She walked the sidewalks with an air of authority, clipboard in hand, a self-fashioned deity in the pantheon of homeowners' associations. It started small, as these things often do. A note slipped under my door, its sharply folded creases mirroring the crispness of its tone. My mailbox apparently did not conform to the neighborhood aesthetic. I chuckled at the absurdity of it, imagining her peering out from behind her lace curtains, noting every deviation in her ledger of grievances. I considered ignoring it, letting the ink of her pettiness dissolve into the ether, but that wasn't my style. Instead, I painted my mailbox a vibrant shade of blue, a small act of rebellion. Each brushstroke felt liberating, a quiet defiance against the monochrome monotony she so adored. The next infraction came swiftly. My grass, it seemed, grew at an unacceptable rate in her eyes. A letter this time typed and formal, carrying the weight of officialdom. I pictured her laboring over it, crafting each word with the precision of a seasoned author. I could almost hear the satisfaction in her keystrokes, the small victories she claimed in dictating the lives of others. I responded in kind, not with words, but with actions. A wildflower garden bloomed where uniformity once reigned, colors clashing in a riotous symphony of nature's discord. The bees loved it. So did I. Karen predictably did not. I could sense her frustration growing, a shadow lengthening in the midday sun. Her gaze lingered longer each day, a silent testament to her mounting irritation. It was a dance we were engaged in, a careful waltz of passive resistance. My resolve was a quiet flame, unwavering and steady. Her notes piled up like autumn leaves, each one a testament to her obsession with control. But they were mere whispers in the face of my unyielding calm. I was the rock in her river of grievances, the steadfast mountain against which her tides broke. Then came the day when the storm finally broke. I was tending to my garden, fingers deep in the rich earth, the air thick with the scent of impending rain. She approached, her footsteps a rapid staccato on the pavement. She had called the police. It seemed convinced that I did not belong. I watched her from a distance, her indignation spilling over in a torrent of words. The officers, bemused and patient, listened to her tirade. Then they turned to me, polite and professional, asking for identification. An ironic smile curled my lips. It was Karen they asked for ID, not me. The irony was delicious. A bitter pill. I hoped she would finally swallow. In that moment, the storm passed, leaving behind a strange calm. My garden stood vibrant in the aftermath, a testament to resilience and quiet defiance. Karen was but a gust in the wind, strong for a moment, but ultimately fleeting. The air was crisp, the kind of sharpness that cuts through the mundane drone of suburbia. The hum of lawnmowers, the distant bark of a dog, all mundane sounds of a neighborhood that pretended at peace but thrummed under the surface with a peculiar tension. Karen, she of the perpetual scowl and clipboard, had taken it upon herself to ensure the sanctity of our pristine enclave. Her eyes, hawk-like and perpetually narrowed, glinted with a fervor that bordered on manic. She decided that my presence was an aberration, a smudge on her otherwise immaculate canvas. The aftermath of her call to the police had not dampened her spirits. If anything, it fueled her. From her perch behind white picket fences, she orchestrated a symphony of absurdity. Rules emerged from the shadows, rules that seemed impossible in their specificity and Kafkaesque in their enforcement. Garbage bins, she decreed, must not be placed on the curb before exactly 7:00 a.m. Any deviation was met with citations slipped under doors, thin slivers of paper that whispered of non-compliance and transgression. My mailbox overflowed with them, each a testament to her relentless pursuit. Grass height, too, became a battleground. Anything over 1.5 inches was deemed unsightly. My lawn, a verdant sea of rebellion, drew her ire. She stood at the edge, measuring tape in hand, her lips curving into a grim satisfaction with each infraction she noted. But it was the whispers that cut deepest gossip, insidious and slippery, wound its way through the community. I became the subject of murmured conversations over garden fences, the topic of curious glances among the morning joggers. There was talk of my being a usurper, an interloper. I smiled at them, felt their eyes slide over me, and wondered at the fragility of perception. Inside, though, I was a tempest. Each morning as I sipped my coffee, I considered the absurdity of it all. The way Karen's world spun on its axis of rules and regulations. How did she not tire? How did she not see the irony of her crusade? But I knew the answer: power, or the illusion of it. The community meeting was her stage. She stood at the front, the overhead lights casting a halo around her. Her voice, sharp as the crack of a whip, echoed with authority. I watched, arms folded, as she outlined new mandates. She spoke of unity and safety, yet her eyes never met mine. It was my turn. A chance to respond, to confront. My voice, low and steady, cut through the room. I spoke of community, of true belonging that wasn't measured by the height of grass or the timely placement of bins. My words were met with silence, a collective intake of breath, and then a voice not mine echoed. In agreement. One person, then another, a ripple in Karen's carefully constructed pond. Her mask slipped for a moment, just a flicker of uncertainty before she regained her composure, but the seed was planted. A small rebellion in the heart of HOA Dom. The meeting ended, the crowd dispersing, whispers louder, now filled with something new. Karen retreated, her once unyielding fortress showing its first cracks. I stood a little taller, the night air cool and invigorating, realizing that belonging was not granted by a clipboard or a list of rules. It was claimed, and mine would not be denied. There I was, standing in the shadow of the oak tree that had stood guard over our neighborhood longer than any of us had lived here. Its branches moved gently, as if waving hello to the sun-soaked clouds drifting lazily by. I took a deep breath, feeling the quiet power of nature around me. It calmed my racing heart, reminded me of resilience. I needed that reminder now. Karen had crossed a line. Her voice still echoed in my mind, shrill and accusatory, like an off-key note in an otherwise harmonious melody. She had claimed I didn't belong, her words, stabbing the air with pointed certainty, calling the police as though she were a sentinel of some imaginary border. But now the tables had subtly turned. The officers, with their practiced, calm and quiet authority, had asked her for identification instead. an ironic twist that felt like a scene straight from a movie, where justice showed up in the unlikeliest of forms. In the aftermath, a curious hush settled over the street. Neighbors had watched from behind curtains, shadows in windows invisible yet present. I felt their eyes on me, a silent chorus, witnessing this unexpected turn of events. I documented everything, every word, every glance, every nuance of the encounter. A meticulous account sketched in my mind, then transferred to paper, with the precision of an artist capturing not just the image, but the essence of a moment. I needed this record, not for the sake of vengeance, but for the quiet power of truth. Truth, after all, was the most potent weapon. Later, in the solitude of my living room, surrounded by the gentle hum of life, my cat purring softly in her sleep, the clock ticking in steady rhythm, I prepared my counter. It wouldn't be loud or brash. I wasn't Karen. My approach would be as subtle as a whisper in the wind, yet as undeniable as the changing seasons. I gathered testimonials from neighbors, quiet affirmations of my place in this community. Each word shared spoke volumes, weaving a tapestry of belonging that was rich and unassailable. This wasn't just about me. It was about creating a space where people could walk without fear of judgment, where diversity wasn't just tolerated, but celebrated. A meeting was called a gathering of the Homeowners Association, where the truth would gently unravel Karen's narrative. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had called for boundaries, yet she would soon find herself isolated by the very fences she'd tried to erect. When the day came, I stood before the group, feeling the weight of their collective gaze. I spoke quietly, letting my words paint the picture of what had transpired. As I described the scene beneath the oak tree, I felt the room shift, the atmosphere crackling with the recognition of an injustice quietly righted. In the end, it was Karen's own actions that undid her. The community didn't need bold speeches or dramatic gestures to see the truth laid bare. They simply needed a gentle nudge, a reminder of who we were and who we wanted to be. As I watched Karen retreat, her indignation melting under the collective disapproval, I felt a wave of relief. This wasn't revenge. It was balance restored. A quiet victory etched in the fabric of our community. I walked home, the path familiar and reassuring beneath my feet. The oak tree stood sentinel still, a witness to the ebb and flow of life's little dramas. I paused beneath its branches, feeling the whisper of the wind, the gentle reminder of resilience. And I knew in that moment that I belonged. The air was thick with the kind of tension that seemed to ripple invisibly between the houses, like the heat shimmering off the pavement on a sun-soaked afternoon. It was a presence you could feel, but not quite see. I stood in my garden, pulling weeds with deliberate patience, savoring the quiet defiance of small victories. My yard had become a sanctuary of sorts where I could escape the prying eyes and whispered judgments that had begun to swirl like an autumn wind down the street. The neighborhood was waking up, and with it, the murmurs of curiosity and alliances forming in unseen corners. Conversations hushed when I passed by. Glances over fences telling tales I hadn't been invited to hear. Familiar faces now wore expressions of uncertainty, as if balancing on the edge of an unspoken divide. Neighbors who once waved with casual familiarity now hesitated, their gestures halting and awkward, like actors unsure of their lines. It was Karen, of course, who had cast this pall over the neighborhood. Her influence, once unnoticed, like the roots of an old tree beneath the surface, now seemed to crack the sidewalks of our community. Her allegation, whispered with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel, had cut into the fabric of our everyday lives. I watched as she patrolled her domain, an unwelcome monarch surveying her kingdom. Her eyes, sharp and unforgiving, darted about like a hawk, searching for prey, always alert for a breach of her rigid order. She was a fixture on the HOA board. Her voice, the loudest in the room, dominating discussions with a practiced air of authority. But now her power was being questioned subtly, almost imperceptibly, as if the very ground she stood on had started to shift. The police visit had left its mark, not just on me but on everyone who bore witness to the spectacle of her being asked for identification on her own doorstep. It was a scene that seemed to unravel her carefully woven narrative. And now, neighbors were talking in low tones and sideways glances about what it meant for her reign of rigidity. In the days that followed, there was a curious energy in the air. A tension, yes, but also a burgeoning resolve. People began to linger more in their driveways, conversations stretching just a bit longer than usual. There was a new camaraderie, a shared understanding that maybe it was time for change. A change from the stringent rules that had been set in stone and the fear of stepping out of line. I felt it too, this shift. A sense of quiet empowerment, like the moment before a storm when the air holds its breath. I had always belonged here, but now I felt it in a way that transcended Karen's narrow definitions. The garden beneath my fingertips was proof of it. Each weed pulled a reminder that roots could be strong, persistent, enduring. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the lawn as a neighbor approached cautiously. There was a pause, a moment suspended in time where I could feel the weight of what was unspoken. A simple nod passed between us, an acknowledgement that needed no words. It was a small act, but profound. A silent rebellion against the narrative Karen had tried to impose. As I returned to my task, the tension felt lighter, dissolving into the evening air. The change was slow, like the turning of a season, but it was there, undeniable. And as the sky deepened to twilight, I was filled with a quiet certainty that things would continue to shift, that the neighborhood would find its way through the tangled mess of Karen's making. Because belonging wasn't about the approval of one, it was about the quiet resilience of the many. The warm glow of the morning sun filtered through my kitchen window, casting long, patient rays across the hardwood floor. I watched them crawl slowly, deliberately, like time itself in this quiet house. It was a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded a few days prior when Karen had tried to stake her claim over the neighborhood like a queen without a crown. Her assumption that the neighborhood belonged to her and that I was an intruder in my own home had been met with the irony it deserved. The officer's request for her ID had been a quiet, elegant victory. But now it was time for the next act in this unwelcome drama. My steps were not towards confrontation but resolution. The legal system can be a labyrinth, but I've always appreciated its methodical nature. The calm, structured process of it all. I sat down at my desk, the leather chair groaning slightly under my weight, a comforting sound. The papers I needed were already neatly arranged in a folder, the ink still fresh on the cease and desist letter drafted by my lawyer. It was a masterpiece of quiet retribution. As I reviewed each paragraph, I could almost hear the echo of the officer's words resonating with a quiet authority that Karen had never learned to wield. The letter was just as precise, each sentence a deliberate step towards reclaiming peace. The neighborhood wasn't hers to govern like some petty kingdom, and this letter was the first stitch in sewing shut that notion. Outside, the soft rustle of leaves played a gentle symphony as I sealed the envelope. It was a beautiful contrast to the silent storm I anticipated would brew once the letter found its way to her mailbox. Patience. I reminded myself. Nature's cycles like this ordeal were best managed with patience. I slipped on my shoes and jacket, the fabric hugging my form like armor. The walk to the mailbox was short, yet significant. It felt ceremonial, a quiet act of defiance wrapped in civility. The street was quiet, the kind of quiet that holds its breath. Each step was deliberate, matching the rhythm of my heart. The mailbox stood like a small sentry at the edge of my lawn. Its metal flag raised in expectation, I tucked the letter inside, closing the door with a definitive click. A simple action, but one that felt monumental. The iron laws of paper and ink would now whisper on my behalf. I turned to head back home, the sun now higher, warmer. In the distance, a lawnmower kicked to life, the hum blending with the birds' morning chatter. Life resumed its ordinary pace. There was something deeply satisfying in the normalcy, a reminder that the world turns despite the small battles we fight. Home again, I sat back at the desk. The certainty of the quiet room enveloped me. I let my mind wander to the possibilities that lay ahead. Perhaps the letter would be enough to temper Karen's reign of petty power. Perhaps not. But I knew this was just the beginning of restoring balance. A gentle tap at the door pulled me from my thoughts. On the doorstep was a small package, a thoughtful gift from a neighbor who had witnessed the spectacle days before. It was a teapot, its porcelain adorned with delicate flowers. A note attached simply read, "For calmer days." I smiled. Yes, calmer days. And perhaps with time Karen would find her own measure of calm. Until then I had tea time, and the quiet assurance that justice like morning light would eventually touch every corner of this quaint suburb. The air seemed to hold its breath heavy with anticipation and the remnants of an afternoon drizzle. The police officers stood like unmoving sentinels before Karen, as if they were part of the scenery itself. Her defiance crumbled under the weight of their silent authority. And I watched, an outsider in my own story. It was a tableau of poetic justice. The officers, unimpressed by her protests, had shifted their attention to the heart of the matter, the question of belonging, of community. Their request for her ID had been a gentle unmasking, revealing the paper-thin authority she wielded over the neighborhood. The irony was not lost on her, nor on us, the silent onlookers who had gathered drawn by the drama as moths to a flame. I stood a little apart, feeling both an actor and the audience. My house, the supposed epicenter of her grievance, loomed quietly behind me, its windows reflecting the overcast sky like unblinking eyes. It had always been a place of refuge, a sanctuary from the chaos beyond its walls. But today, it felt different, freed, vindicated. Karen's ID was a talisman she clutched with whitening knuckles. Her face, usually a mask of steely control, flickered with disbelief and indignation. Her world was unraveling, stitch by careful stitch. The officers, patient and professional, were the harbingers of this change, not through force, but through the simple act of accountability. There was a subtle shift in the gathered crowd, a collective exhale of relief that seemed to ripple through the air. Neighbors who had once skittered like leaves in the wake of her judgments stood a little taller, emboldened by the quiet triumph unfolding. Eyes met mine. Briefly, nods of solidarity exchanged without the need for words. Karen's voice, usually sharp and commanding, now carried a note of uncertainty. Her authority was a fading echo, a shadow that no longer fit in the light of day. It was as if the neighborhood, long held hostage by her overreach, had been waiting for this moment to reclaim its narrative. Her defeat was not loud or explosive. It was a soft, inevitable descent, like a leaf finally surrendering to gravity. She seemed smaller now, almost a specter of her former self. The officers, satisfied with their duty, returned her ID with the same impartiality with which they had requested it. I turned away, letting the scene dissolve behind me. My path led back to the familiar creak of my porch steps, to the steady rhythm of a life poised to resume its natural order. Inside, the house welcomed me with open arms, its rooms filled with the quiet symphony of home. The community would heal. It would regrow like a garden after a long winter. Karen would remain a part of it. Still, though her influence would fade like a whisper lost to the wind. We were not enemies, merely neighbors, with stories tangled by circumstance. As I closed the door behind me, I felt the weight of the past lift, replaced by the soothing promise of tomorrow. It was over, not with a bang, but with the soft whisper of justice served and peace restored. The balance had shifted, and with it, the promise of a new beginning.